All right, so hi and good afternoon. My name is Kate Pipa. I'm the events coordinator at the Bridgeport Regional Business Council, and we're very excited to be hosting this webinar today on teleworking and flexible work arrangements. We are excited to have two folks from CTrides here present a little bit more on the topic, so I'm happy to introduce Russell McDermott, who's the program director at CTrides, and Joanne Cavadini, who's the Commuter program manager. And I will turn it over to Russell in a moment, but I do ask that if you would like to, during the presentation, you can submit questions. There's a question and answer function at the bottom of the screen, so please do feel free to utilize that as well as the chat function. And towards the end, hopefully we will have a few moments and Russell and Joanne will be around to answer questions. So thank you so much to Russell and Joanne, and I will turn this over to Russell.
All right. Thank you, Kate. I appreciate it, and I appreciate everyone for joining us and having us here today. Today, we're going to talk about some high-level best practices for teleworking during COVID-19. As Kate said, my name is Russell McDermott. I'm the program director and one of the telework specialists at CTrides. I'm joined today by my colleague, Joanne Cavadini, who serves as one of our regional commuter program managers. And to provide some context on exactly what we're talking about today with best practices, because that's a pretty broad topic. Today, we're going to look at why teleworking is so important for businesses, not just during COVID-19, but when we look past the situation it's in, why it's something that you're going to really need to think about maintaining as part of your company culture, what the environment was like prior to COVID-19, and what it looks like now, the ideal implementation steps for your ideal program. And lastly, we're going to look at work-life balance and why this is something that you all need to be thinking about and how it's going to affect your businesses. So before we get into that, let me tell you a little bit about us. CTrides is a program of the Connecticut Department of Transportation. We're a statewide commuter services program. So we offer services for both commuters and employers. For commuters, we help them find the best way to get to work or school other than driving by themselves. So everything from carpool, vanpool, transit, bike, walk, and telework. For employers, we provide customized worksite solutions that helps companies with their commuting and transportation challenges. One of those services, and the one we're really going to be focusing on today, is a robust telework program where we can help companies to develop, formalize, or expand their existing remote work program. So whenever I do these presentations, I explain who we are and what we do. The question I always get, either directly or indirectly, is, well, what qualifies CTrides or the DOT to really provide this type of services? And the fact is, the Department of Transportation has actually won a number of different awards for their teleworking programs and services that they've provided to the state. One of the best kept secrets, I think, at the DOT is that Connecticut was actually one of the first adopters off remote work and providing these services to the private sector. Our specialists have well over 30 years of experience, and our program has been supporting local businesses in the state since the mid-90s. So that's a long time that we've been providing these services. And our specialty has always been the rapid deployment of programs. Of course, we have our famous winter storms to thank for that. With that said, we've been using that skill set to apply to the current COVID-19 crisis. So I'm a firm believer that whenever we talk about teleworking, we really have to start with making the business case. The fact is, teleworking is not a right, and it's not something employees can just choose to do. In my experience, when you lay out the facts and really outline the benefits associated with remote work, it creates buy-in from the top down. And as we're talking about best practices during this presentation, we have to highlight that buy-in from leadership is a key ingredient for any sustainable telework program. And this quote on the screen really sums it up pretty nicely, where it says, it's not just about the finances or employee happiness, but it's also sustainability and security. And when you look at that in totality, when taken together, it really talks about the fundamentals that companies look for when implementing or investing in any program. In this case, we happen to be talking about, remote working or teleworking. So let's do a deeper dive into some of the benefits, which ultimately ties back into what we're just talking about, which is making the business case and getting that top-down support. Some of the ones I want to spotlight: business continuity. Again, you don't have to look too far. The most recent and vivid example of business continuity is what's going on right now with COVID-19. Teleworking is allowing companies who would otherwise be shut down to continue some level of operations, increase productivity. Their study after study continues to show that teleworkers are shown to be significantly more productive than their in-office counterparts. In many cases, this is by double-digit percentage points. Recruitment and retention. Prior to COVID-19, the number one issue we heard from all the companies we work with across the state was recruitment and retention. And we continue to see surveys and data that say increasingly people are prioritizing things like work-life balance and flexibility over financial compensation. So when you think about how that fundamentally affects your business, that's a really powerful statement that we're seeing. The environment is such a big topic right now, and telework programs can help to contribute towards not only the companies, but frankly everyone's personal environmental goals. And last but certainly not least are some of the numerous cost savings associated when programs like teleworking are implemented. So let's now talk about what the telework environment was like prior to COVID-19. For obvious reasons, telework is getting a lot of attention right now, and sometimes that can really blur the lines between perception and reality. So right now it looks like everyone teleworks, and everyone's job has the ability to telework, and that just really isn't the case. It just so happens that there are a lot of people who can, but there's still a significant amount of people who's just by the nature of their jobs, when you think of those essential workers, who just don't have the option. So about 5.34% of people in the US worked remotely, and Connecticut, it was a little higher than the national average at about 5.6%. With that being said, there's been a massive increase in the number of people teleworking over the last 15 years, so about 173%. And that is a huge increase in what is a relatively short period of time. I mean, 173% increase is just massive. And we proudly crossed a key milestone in 2017, where cumulatively you had more Americans who worked from home than used mass transit as a whole. So what does this all mean? Basically, it tells us that teleworking was growing at a rapid and pretty significant rate prior to the COVID-19 crisis that we're in right now, and we expect that trend to frankly continue. Now, there were a lot of factors that contributed to the rapid growth, such as the development of new technologies, and one of the things we touched on earlier, which was that push for more of a work-life balance that we started seeing from employees across the country. And if you take one thing away from this slide, it should be this: teleworking is quickly shifting away for many companies from a nice to have to a necessity for a number of different reasons. So now let's look at the current environment. I'm sure many of you check at least one of these boxes that's on the screen. Most companies were not prepared for the sudden shift to telework. And even those companies with existing programs, many of them had challenges scaling it up to the level that we're at right now, whether that's with technology, with VPN access, or how many people you can, have on your system, or, the current policy not being expandable, or some challenges with training, not only employees who may be doing this for the first time, but when you talk about training, it's also for people managers who may not have typically managed a remote workforce, which, there's a different skill set with managing someone remotely versus someone who's in the office who you could just go down the hall to. This situation really showed us the need for things like a formal policy and agreement. It's one thing to let several people telework on an ad hoc basis, but it's another thing to manage large groups of people or entire organizations. And the most important thing that we saw, and that we really need to remember, is that we're not in a normal situation. This is not a typical time. This is something new that we're all going through. No one was prepared for this. A lot of people didn't and still don't have whether it's child or dependent care. Many of you and your employees, myself included, we're doing double duty in addition to our regular jobs. We're also, teachers for our kids or daycare, and, we're all just adjusting to this new normal. And we need to remember that people are under a lot of stress right now. They have a lot of uncertainty, whether it's in their personal and professional lives. Every time you turn on the news, it's, you rarely hear of a good story. And, there's a lot of bad going on right now. So it's really important for us to keep this perspective when we're talking about this topic, when we're talking about teleworking and best practices. At the back of your mind, we also need to keep the perspective of what's going on right now in the current environment. So we just discussed that we're not in a quote unquote normal situation. And as such, we have to adjust as best we can to our new environment. And this slide shows what the ideal implementation process looks like of a telework program. And the key word here is ideal. And of course, we're not in an ideal situation. But with that said, this serves as a guide, and it can really be adjusted based on the situation a company is in. So if you already, which most of you more than likely are in the middle of a telework program, I recommend that you use this as a guide of some things that you could be doing now to really reinforce your foundation. So I'll run through really quickly what each step covers. And while I'm doing that, you can think to yourself, is this something that I've done, or is this something that I could be doing? Or maybe you're thinking about, well, maybe this person could serve in that capacity, because all of these things lead back to that overarching best practices theme that we're talking about. So number one is selecting a telework coordinator. And that's basically having one point person who's going to really lead the charge, who's going to, see this through from inception to the end. So if you need a go-to person, a point person at your organization for your telework program. Number two, having a steering committee. At this point, you want to have a working group of internal stakeholders. When we're talking about telework, and it touches on so many different departments, that you really need to get feedback from those and frankly buy-in from those stakeholders. So this typically consists of folks from the IT team, definitely people from human resources, and again, management. You want to make sure that you have that management buy-in. And if you have any other stakeholders who you think should be involved, whether it's from a green team, again, you all know your organizations a lot better than I do. So you could think of who would be the good members within this steering committee. Developing policies and guidelines. This is probably the most consequential step. This is key to develop a best practices program, which will allow you to really maximize the benefits of telework. And, one of the no-call services we provide is to provide samples of these policies and guidelines and help companies develop these. So if you are doing teleworking, you don't have a policy, don't have a guideline in place, again, we can provide that to you at no cost, but it's something we really suggest. Determining your technology. This is not as large of a barrier as it used to be, but it's still very important that you have this down packed. You know, technology is what facilitates teleworking. So you really need to make sure that you get this right. Again, a lot of companies found this out the hard way over the past few weeks about not knowing, you know, what technologies that they needed to really implement or fully maximize their programs. Training. This is probably the most overlooked aspect of teleworking programs. And in my experience, it's the #1 reason a lot of remote work programs don't work out. I could probably do a full webinar just about training and the importance of it. And again, this is not just training for employees, but this is training for people managers and helping them to identify certain skill sets or traits that can make them more effective when managing a remote workforce. Assessing the cost savings, again, going back to the business case, you always want to reinforce the benefits of the programs. There are a lot of companies out there who have a ton of great success stories, and for a number of reasons it's still for some reason considered taboo, or you know, companies are afraid to brag about the benefits that they have experienced with these remote work programs. So again, just by the nature of what I do, I think it's super important for companies to document the effects of their programs. And you know, don't take my word for it. You know, document what's going on and assess those benefits for yourself. And last but not least, your program should not be static. You need to constantly evaluate your program to find out what's working and what's not. That evaluation piece is so important to make sure that you have the right program for the right company. Again, at first glance, this seems like a lot of work, but a lot of this stuff is pretty straightforward. It's not as time consuming or complicated as you'd think. And again, our services, we can walk you through this step by step, and you make this a really seamless process for you. So again, let's talk about the business of teleworking now. Even though we just mentioned you know, this with the guidelines and the policies, I want to spotlight the importance of having these things. I understand that this isn't the fun or exciting part of teleworking, but it's so important that these things are there to, #1, it's there to protect your company. It's there to protect you as an employer, and it's there to protect your employees. These policies are guidelines. Think of them as that, there to protect you. Think of it as this might not be the best example, but as an insurance policy for yourself. In addition to protecting everyone, it allows you to quickly scale up your program in an organized way. Again, it's one thing to have a few people teleworking every now and then, but it's a different animal when you have whole departments or an entire company doing it. It makes the program sustainable. And as I said before, it really helps you maximize the benefits of telework. And instead of looking at the current situation as a one-off, you know, we should really be looking at how does this then become part of the larger internal solution after COVID-19. Again, part of our services is that we help you develop these policies and guidelines that work for your organization and work for your team. So even though most of you on this call are employers, that also makes you people managers. And it's really important for you to understand what your team members want from you. I'm going to go over a few of these items. Accessibility. They want to know that you're there. They want to know how to communicate with you, when to communicate with you, and that there's that clear line of communication back and forth. Clarity. You need to be 100% clear and direct with what your expectations and requests are. Ambiguity does not work, especially when you have someone working remotely. So clear, direct, consistent communication. Again, if there's one thing you get from this entire webinar, ambiguity does not work. You need to have that clear and direct communication. Frequent communication, that is so important. Again, keeping your teams updated about what's going on. But with that being said, you have to make sure that you don't cross the line into micromanagement. Honesty, if there's an issue, you need to address it. Whether it's with a team member, the processor, or a work product, honesty. So that's part of that clear and direct communication. And flexibility. Manage based on results, not proximity. The number one question I get from people managers whenever we do a training or a presentation is, how do I know my employees are working if I can't see them? And the answer I always give them is, people can waste time just as easy in the office as they can at home. So manage based on results, not proximity. I can with a high level of confidence tell you that survey after survey, the data consistently shows that people who work remotely, by and large, are more productive than their in-office counterparts. So what managers want, what do you all on the call want when we're talking about teleworking? Well, a few examples are, first and foremost, is the job getting done? At the end of the day, many of us who run businesses are in a leadership role. That's what it all comes down to. Is the job getting done? Number two, you want to be kept informed about what's going on. Managers don't like surprises, and you want to make sure that your team members are adhering to your policy and guidance that you provide. And there are several more on there that you all can see. If I had to boil both the employee and the manager list down to what I believe are the most important points or takeaways, again, it would be clear and direct communication on both sides, honest feedback, and accessibility. So before I turn it over to Joanne, let me leave you with this. As you continue on this journey, remember that you have to plan for success. You're not just going to accidentally have a great program, or you're not going to accidentally be successful with this. You have to act on problems as they arise, and problems will arise, especially if this is a new program, and that's not a bad thing, but you have to act on them and address them. Again, be honest. This goes back to that clear and direct communication. Asking for input from your team. Don't do this alone. And remember that there's an adjustment period for both employees and managers. But as you continue to work at this, things do get better. And always, especially in this time we're in, be understanding. Like I said, we're not in a normal time. Everyone is doing their best to adjust to the new normal. So always keep that context, especially during this adjustment period. And last but certainly not least, these feedback loops are so critical for the continued development and evolution of your program. Again, you never want these things to be static. Now I want to turn it over to Joanne, who's going to talk about why work-life balance is no longer an employee issue. Work-life balance is now a business issue. So Joanne, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Russell. Hi, everyone. So you may be wondering, how does work-life balance of my employees benefit my business? Or why is it important to have a team with balanced work-life roles? Well, there's overwhelming evidence that supports the work-life balance of your team members will definitely directly benefit your business. So when you have a robust work-life balance program, it can result in improved retention and recruitment. It can reduce absenteeism and promote increased productivity. As well, for your employees, it offers the benefits of reduced job stress, improved job satisfaction, and it also provides them with a better sense of health and well-being, resulting in tangible benefits to your company. While it's not required for you to have or manage a work-life balance program for your team, there are definite benefits to offering assistance and guidance, and we'll look at the roles that employees are dealing with, as well as some of the business and personal benefits of a work-life balance program. So I have to say that if we were doing this program or presentation 6 months ago, it would be a very different presentation. We're not talking about a few select positions with responsibilities and a skill set that are just ideal for working from home. In many cases, your entire workforce is now teleworking, and that probably includes most of you that are here today. So honestly, even in the best situations, work-life balance can be a concern when you have employees working from home. But with the situation we find ourselves in now, it's even more challenging. But with careful planning and dedication, a telework could support the balance of work and family for your employees. So many of us have been forced to figure out this process of telework while navigating the balance of our homes suddenly turned into our workplace. In many cases, it's also our children's school. We have done this with a moment's notice, and it's definitely impacted our daily business practices and forced us to learn a lot about the need for flexibility. So how we navigate these unexpected pitfalls can be the key to telework being a benefit and even strengthening our business. And I can say that while keeping in mind that there's not a one-size-fits-all process associated with navigating work-life balance while teleworking, based on your business culture, there will be differences in how each business navigates telework and work-life balance. So as well as these differences, it's also going to be different for each employee as they navigate their work and family roles. So as I mentioned, many of the issues we are discussing today are a bit different from the work-life balance issues we may have dealt with a few months ago. When working from home, it is even more important to maintain boundaries. So from a work-life balance perspective, we often talk about role boundaries. Being aware of the boundaries your employees will be navigating can help maintain your business practices. So one other thing when we're dealing with boundaries, it's helpful to know that when we're working from home, probably the most important boundary that we're dealing with is a physical boundary. So it's our office space. And it's important to highlight the importance of having a designated space and its impact on our role balance. I realize this can be easier said than done when we're told with just no notice that everyone's going to be working from home. But even if it's a corner of the dining room, a living room, set up as closely as possible to our desk that we had at the office, it can help with continuity. So this physical continuity can also provide continuity in performance. Social boundaries are probably the biggest work-life balance role that we discuss. These are our role boundaries. They tend to be a bit easier to manage in the office. You leave home and you go to the office. At work, you're employee, and at home, you're you, or your family role. But when working from home, these boundaries can be a little bit harder to navigate, especially when there's not a lot of preparation in advance. So no matter what your team member's living situation is, they have both a work role and a family life role. So having clearly defined boundaries are really important, and there's definitely a learning curve to maintaining this separation when teleworking. So knowing that there will be some difficulties in transitioning between these roles when working from home, we should just plan ahead. So providing your team with guidance on your expectations, you can avoid some work interruptions. Assisting with business continuity, your telework policy should include scheduling boundaries. And this is really just your employee schedule. The only difference is you would have to include expectations for your employees' availability and any room for flexibility because they'll be working from home. Flexibility is often seen as one of the greatest benefits to both work and home role balance. However, it can come with many potential pitfalls for businesses. You want to encourage your team members to avoid too much crossover while balancing each role effectively. And during this pandemic, we've all seen role boundaries blur in ways that we could have never seen before. I think we've all been on a conference call where there's a child participating in distance learning nearby or a barking dog. So these roles, again, have been challenged in ways we never could have expected. We are running the risk of role overload, especially the family role. Just a few months ago, one of the greatest concerns we had with teleworking would have been the work role overload. And this is, occurs when an employee uses too much of their personal time on work-related tasks. Now, that can sound great to start. It can even seem like an asset, but it's rarely sustained for a long period of time and can result in employee burnout. But what we're seeing with the COVID-19 crisis is many workers in Connecticut are now dealing with family role overload. And I think we can all agree that this has really become a priority for our teams, and especially true when you have employees with school-age children. So understanding that this role overload can occur is the best means to prevention. It can be helpful to encourage your teams to reach out to your telework coordinator if they need support. And our goal is to work towards the proper balance of your work role and your family role so we can avoid lost productivity and avoid employee burnout. So there's definitely a connection between healthy employees and a healthy business. Healthy team members have less absenteeism, insurance costs are usually lower, and our most often healthy employees are more productive. So meeting goals in promoting health behaviors can actually be easier when working from home. Simply having control over our environment combined with not commuting and saving some time, it can allow us to engage in healthy behaviors. When working from home, many of the social cues to move, however, are eliminated. It can be helpful to encourage employees to take mini breaks throughout the day. These mini wellness breaks are not necessarily for fitness, but more for our brains. If we don't stop and take a break, our brains will usually take a break whether we want it to or not. So it's important to encourage these breaks, otherwise it will have a direct impact on business and productivity. And it can be worse when an employee is not leaving the house because the activities that have us moving through the day are eliminated. So just the act of getting ready for a commute and making your commute or going to a meeting in a conference room, that's all gone when employees are working from home. And so encouraging them to take a step outside for a breath of fresh air or perhaps mini meditation, just stepping away from the desk could be helpful. I know recently our organization began offering 10-minute mini meditation sessions at lunchtime on Teams, and I think they've been so helpful for so many of us. Another important health benefit to focus on is our social connections. It's an important part of an office culture, and for a lot of people, this was just stopped, in a moment's notice. And socialization provides us with an opportunity for team members to discuss ongoing projects or even decompress. So teleworking may not provide that same social connection as the traditional office workplace. So it's important to encourage employees to connect socially through technology, even if it's just a Zoom coffee break. And then finally, maintaining our health appointments. Participating in preventive medical appointments are an important component of health and well-being. While it will be different for each organization, teleworking can make it easier for some team members to schedule appointments or keep these appointments. And that's especially true now with so many doctors going over to telemedicine options. So all of these practices make it easier to maintain a healthy lifestyle and in turn, a healthy workforce. And as we discussed earlier, a healthy workforce is a healthy business. So Finally, we're increasingly aware of the costs associated when our employees are not working to full capacity. And often this is caused by a work-life balance issue. So it can cost in absenteeism and punctuality and performance and business continuity. So by knowing that your team members' work-life balance can directly impact your business, you should provide or could provide a clear direction and guidance for each employee, especially those that are teleworking. You can avoid much of the potential loss of performance when your team is working from home. So wrapping up with just a few highlights of the benefits that can positively impact your business. If managed correctly, telework can reduce stress for team members and make balance for work life and family life easier. And in turn, it can promote job satisfaction, work environment for your employees where they can thrive. As well, it could result in increased productivity directly benefiting your business. And now I'll turn it back over to Russell.
Thanks, Joanne. I think you made some really great points and observations there. It really shows that there's a direct correlation that shows a team member's happiness and health and well-being, and how that has a direct impact on our organization. And one of the things that you mentioned with the physical boundaries that unfortunately we didn't do a deep dive on here, but is you need to remember, as you have your team members working remotely, especially those that are doing this from who didn't do this in the past, and even for some of yourselves who this may be new for, you need to remember to always apply good ergonomics towards it. So making sure you're not slumping, or you have the monitor adjusted at a right height, and you're not just sitting with the laptop on your lap. I mean, these all have direct health consequences, not only for you, but for some of your team members. So again, promoting teleworking in a right way is extremely important, especially for the people managers on the call. So to wrap everything up, I've tried to consolidate some of the characteristics of a successful telework program on this slide. Again, when I started this out, I told you top-level commitment. If you don't have support from leadership, they're not engaged, they're not buying, they don't see the benefits, then ultimately your program is destined to fail. Planning and selection process. This goes back to the guidelines and policies, and this is really where it diverts from. If I was given this presentation prior to COVID-19, part of what you have with your guidelines and your policy is a selection process. So that might include a self-nomination form to make sure that the people who you're recommended and who's going to be teleworking or remote working, that they meet certain criteria. Because typically in an ideal world, you don't have everyone teleworking. Teleworking is not great for everyone. It's not great for all positions. But as we transition back to normal, and as we start reinforcing our foundation with some of these best practices, you want to have this planning and selection process to make sure that as we start transitioning back to having people go back into the workplace, that you have something in place that says, you know what, I want these group of people to continue working remotely, and you have a justification, you have backup to show, okay, why are you going to have these folks continue teleworking when you're asking these folks back in? So these are things we have to start thinking about as we start transitioning back to having people in the office, because right now, I'll just speak internally from what we're doing, it's extremely difficult for us to start transitioning everyone back into our office, So we're looking at different things like flexible work arrangements, whether it's staggered schedules or flexible days or things like that. Planning for access and communication. again, clear, direct communication is key. That's the linchpin for a successful teleworking program, and making sure that you're accessible and you communicate. Whether it's you can reach me between these times, or what are core hours that you need to be available, or your team members need to be available, and when are interruptions appropriate and when are they not. Without those visual cues that we have from not being in the office, these are things that we have to be explicit and direct and clear about with our team members, and vice versa. A teleworking program needs to be flexible. Again, if there's one thing that this crisis has shown us is if you're inflexible, you're in trouble. And I think all good telework programs are flexible, and they're able to accommodate sudden changes and sudden shifts. And that ties into the next point, which it needs to fit your organization's culture. There is no one size fits all. I don't have a magic box where I could say, hey, do this and you're going to have the greatest teleworking program there is. Everything we do, all of our services, we customize it and we tailor it. No one knows your company better and what's going to work and what's not going to work than you. That's not something that myself or any other third party can fit. So it's important to make sure that whatever program you have, you're proud of it and it really has your stamp of approval, and it's customized to your organization. And last but not least, as we look into the future, at some point we are going to get past this COVID-19 crisis, and we are going to return to whatever that new normal looks like. I don't think anyone really knows what that is at this point. But, I showed you the data early on in this presentation of what the environment was like prior to COVID-19, the rapid growth in telework and what people are looking for. I think that's only going to accelerate at a rapid pace. And as such, I think now is the time to use this as a trial program, as a pilot program. What you're doing with your teleworking programs, think of it as a pilot program, because that's what it is, and examine what works, what doesn't, find out what works, build on it, find out what doesn't work, change it, and then make your program expandable. I think once you start seeing and you start recognizing a lot of these benefits, you're going to want to start saying, okay, how can I continue to expand this in a best practices ideal type of way? I listed the benefits. I cited survey after survey that supports it by overwhelming data. But the biggest thing that's going to be useful for all of you is seeing what works for you. I mean, when you start seeing the benefits that you're achieving, I think that's going to be the most impactful thing that we can do. So with that being said, that's the end of our presentation. Again, thank you all so much for joining us today. If you have any questions, you need our services, please visit info@ctrides.com. You could contact us via phone, email. We have a lot of information on our website. And I'll turn it back over to Kate.
All right, thank you so much, Russell and Joanne. This was great. I definitely got up and stretched during it. So again, I do thank you for taking time today to be on this webinar, as well as everybody for tuning in. Does anybody have any questions for Russell or Joanne? And I do see one question that just asked if you were able to share your contact information. I know you just said that you can go to the website CTrides. Is it .org?
.com.
It is .com. Okay.
CTrides.com. You could email us at info@ctrides.com. We have a great customer support team. They could help you with a lot of information. If you have some detailed questions or you want a consultation, they will route that to either myself or Joanne or one of our other specialists. And I mean, everyone we work with is great. So you're in good hands, regardless of whoever you get. but if if you have a preference on who you want to work with, just put a note that, oh, please forward this to Russell or Joanne.
And I do want to mention, I believe when you registered, there was a checkbox that mentioned that if you didn't check it, we are going to share your information with CTrides to reach out to you to work on a potential workplace teleworking policy. Again, if you don't want to be contacted, just let me know, but otherwise we do plan to share that information. Does anybody else have any more questions?
I think there's a question that says, there's a question from Facebook that says, how would this change when kids go back to school and we're still working from home? Great question. Again, it still goes back to the foundations, and customizing your program. So whether kids are there or you have those child or dependent care issues, you really want to make sure that you're following those best practices. And again, most of the questions like that should really be addressed in your telework policy. So when we start seeing kids going back to school and we start returning to the new phase of what's considered normal, typically you want to have something in your teleworking policy that says, working from home or working remotely is you need to have certain child care or dependent care arrangements. It should not be in lieu of. So again, this is where it goes back to having that policy, but also making it flexible, because again, there are a lot of companies who we worked with who had those disclaimers in their policy, but it was flexible enough to say, okay, obviously we're in a unique situation, and right now that portion of the policy will be waived because it's frankly something that's impacting everyone. So again, the main premise of what we're talking about, which is those best practices, that's where you really want to focus on. So even though the situation might change, and things are going to change, we're seeing it change week to week, you always want to go back to the fundamentals and the foundation.
All right, are there any other questions? And to answer, I think Christine asked if the webinar, if a copy of the presentation will be shared. So we are recording it at the BRBC, and I do plan to share the video to everyone who did register. And as far as presentation goes, let's ask.
Yeah, I'm more than, Kate, I can send you a copy of the presentation, and anyone who needs a copy, you could grab it. We also just did a pretty comprehensive comprehensive series of webinars on teleworking during COVID-19 for both employers and employees, where we did a deep dive into technology and a lot of different aspects of it. So it's all on our website. Right when you go to the main page, you'll see a link at the top directing you to it. So that's another resource as well. And like I said, Kate, right after this, I will shoot you an email with a PDF copy of the presentation.
Great, thank you so much. And yeah, so I will include a link to the other webinars as well. I think it's a 4-part series. It looked really great. So expect to get that from me if you did register. All right, are there any other questions? Okay, again, I just want to say thank you so much, Russell and Joanne. This was really great as folks are navigating this teleworking, working from home situation. I think these are some really good points and structure to it. So thank you, and I do appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you for having us.
All right, thank you so much, everyone, and have a nice day.